All right, Libby.
Hi, Noreen.
Hi.
Great to see you.
You too. You were Libby Fitzgerald. You were married when you started here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So talk to me first about when you started here, what your job was, and when you left here, and what happened in between.
It's a long span, almost 20 years. Yes, I really fell into it, Noreen. I did not plan or expect to do this. We moved from New York to Lynchburg. My husband finished his medical training, had two children. I had a third one here once we were here. Oops.
I'm sorry, I see this tipping down and it might not be recording. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to punch you in the face. I was afraid it was, okay, sorry, sorry.
Is it recording?
All right, it's, okay, it keeps moving. This is a stiff cord. Okay, just try not, there we go.
I won't touch it. Okay.
All right.
And I'm still recording.
Okay.
Also. Let me just make sure. Ms. Fitzgerald, if you wanted to say a few words, I want to make sure I still.
So are we starting over again, or we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still see levels. So
Okay.
You're fine if you want to.
Okay.
All right, so you said you fell into it.
I sort of fell into it because we moved here from New York to start our life when my husband finished his medical training. I didn't have any plans to go into television work. I had worked at Time magazine in New York, so journalism had begun to be an interest of mine. But I had three little children, very little. And but I fell into this. A friend I met here asked me to do a 30-second promo for the Lynchburg Fine Arts Center back then. And I came over here, said, sure, I'll do it. I wasn't gun shy. I mean, I wasn't shy of cameras because my family had been in politics all my life and my dad in Congress. So I had been with the media and on camera a lot over my years of growing up. So it didn't frighten me. So I said, sure, came and did it. And the station manager happened to be watching at the time. And after that, he offered me this noontime talk show, live daily talk show, which I was very taken aback about, but sounded so intriguing. And I thought, oh, can I possibly juggle this with these three little children? But it was just sounded so much fun. I had to do it. Well, we found a partner for me, so we kind of alternated days, but it was daily. But I could do my preparation at home, so it didn't take a lot of time being away from home, which worked well. But it was only on for about a year because it happened to be opposite a very popular soap opera. So that was it. We got canceled. So I then.
What was it called?
It was called Noon 30. Okay. And I had one funny incident I'll tell you about when I was doing it. It was a raised platform in the middle of the studio that a professor from, I think, Virginia Tech was my guest, and we were talking about something very serious. And my little 18-month-old, I think at the time, my babysitter didn't show up, and so I brought him along, and I put him in the back of the studio with one of the cameramen. I said, would you just keep him here while we do the show? And it was live, so in about the middle of the show, he broke away and he toddled up to the platform and sat on my lap right in the middle. And it was live, so we couldn't turn the cameras off and say, we'll redo this. And he just sort of sat there, and I remember being so nonplussed. I didn't know whether to acknowledge him or ignore him and hope that he would just go on and hope that nobody noticed that this little person was sitting next to me. Anyway, I always remember that. It was just such a funny incident.
What did you choose to do?
I think I must have briefly introduced him, you know.
Oh, that would lighten the mood.
Yes. So
what year was this?
I started when we moved here in 71, this was 72 that I started. So it was 72 to 73 about that program was. So after that got canceled, I started doing lots of public affairs programs. And Central Fidelity Bank at the time, I remember, sponsored a lot of half-hour public affairs programs. They were called specials. And I produced and moderated them and on things like drug issues, medical malpractice, I remember, was one of them, and then several that were with candidates for office. I remember John Warner, when he was running for Senate, and Liz Taylor was his wife, came for a half-hour interview program. Also did one with Eddie Dalton when she allowed me to come and tour the governor's mansion in Richmond. The First Lady, Eddie Dalton, wife of John Dalton, who was our governor at the time. And that was really a thrill to get a tour of the mansion. And she was just gracious and lovely. And I did a half-hour program with Barry Goldwater, who had run in 1964 for president, and my dad coincidentally had run with him as his vice presidential candidate. So I had known Barry. He came to Lynchburg and did this program with me. And, people in this area were very interested in that because it was an area I think that was kind of supportive of him. So then I did numerous others as public affairs programs. Then we started a program called Emphasis 13, and that was a weekly public affairs program on all different topics. I would just pick the topic. Another one was called Spectrum. They weren't at the same time, but they followed each other, and that was a weekly, kind of like a documentary. I remember I had a photographer assigned to me for that, and I would sort of write the script, kind of what I thought I was going to do, and we'd go out in the field and we would shoot all of this video, and then we'd come back and I'd finalize the script and we'd edit it all together with the video that we shot, and that was fun. Then after I did all those kind of was running the public affairs programming at the station because nobody else was doing that kind of thing, I think, at the time but me, And then after a run of a lot of those, I started doing news reporting. And I really enjoyed it. Now, that was a very big change because, when you do public affairs programming, you have lots of time to prepare and to do your research and put it together. News reporting, as you know, of course, you have to do it very quickly, put it together very quickly, and you're working on a timeline and a deadline for the show each day and put the story together. And typically, I have never been a person of few words, so I would have to cut huge amounts of my stories. As I say, they end up on the cutting room floor. I'd write it and then, it was way over a minute, 30 seconds, which is what it was supposed to be. So I'd cut. So I did that then really, I guess, pretty much for the rest of the time that I was here. So that was probably late 70s until 1990. And but I really enjoyed it because you were out in the field, you got to meet so many people and learn so many about so many things, and I just kind of have always had an insatiable curiosity, I guess, for finding out about people and events, and I very much felt like, in a way, it was a public service that I was doing. I always felt passionate about informing and empowering citizens, in a community to know about what's going on. And I felt like that was an important role. So I really very much enjoyed doing that. And then I did some election night returns anchoring with Jeff Taylor a few times. And I enjoyed that because politics, as I say, had always been part of my family, my growing up years. But I couldn't anchor full time, even though I was asked a couple times because of these three children, who were babies when I started, and they were teenagers then finally. But I just didn't feel like I could, being a good mother was kind of my priority. And although I loved my career and I wanted very much for it to be significant for me in a sort of a niche in the community, I certainly didn't want to neglect my duties at home. And my husband was awfully busy in a new medical practice, so I couldn't count on him, for much babysitting help. So I never did anchor except for that election night anchoring.
Did you do that a few times, like every election night?
Not every one, but I did do several. I did it with Stan Jason once, was an anchor way back, and with Jeff a few times. And that was fun. I enjoyed that.
So what year did you say again you started?
72. I started in 72 and he was here till about 90.
And what were you using? You started with film, right?
We started with film, and yes, and I was recalling that when we had film, and I don't remember exactly when we went to tape, those large tapes, but when we had film, the nerve-wracking thing when you were doing news reporting was that when you're out in the field and you're doing your stand-ups for the close of the story, for the open or the close of the story, it was very important that you do them on the first take, preferably because the film was very expensive and they weren't about to do 5 or 10 takes on this, so it made you so nervous. And then finally they went to tape, which meant, if you flubbed it, you could redo until you got it right, And I remember that was very big because it's a little nerve-wracking to think you have to be perfect the first time,
Were you reporting at the time with film?
Mm-hmm.
When
yes,
you turned to
in the
reporting,
field.
it was film. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you have to edit it yourself too?
No, I didn't. When I did that kind of documentary program, Spectrum and some Emphasis 13, I would, with my cameraman, I would help edit because I wrote the script and we had to sort of piece it together, like a puzzle, the video with the film with the with the script. So I did some of that, but I didn't actually do the editing. No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
Never learned that. No.
So, Jim Stapleton, I could say, all I could think of was
Yes.
Charles Middleton.
Yeah. Yes.
Jim Stapleton was here when you started.
When I just started, but it's hard to remember for how long. Not a huge long time when I was here, but yes, in the very beginning, he was lovely, lovely man. Oh, couldn't have been just so. He was so nice. Couldn't have been nicer and more welcoming. And
Did he help you in any way, mentor you at all, or?
I don't recall. Yeah, that he did. But he was very welcoming, kind, and yeah.
So what, are there any, well, you worked with Jeff for a long time. Mm-hmm. What are your, what, when you think of your career here, what memories stand out to you?
Well, I just guess I made so many wonderful friends and learned so much about the community, and subsequently I got involved in, over the years, many things in the community, service-wise in the community, things that interested me, and then I felt could use the help. And so I guess I got introduced to a lot of that by doing this, because you certainly learn about the entire community, I treasure those years here. It was absolutely wonderful. And I subsequently went to WBTF Public Radio for about 15 years, which was, a different experience, but also wonderful. It's just I think journalism is just an absolutely wonderful career. I majored in Russian in college. I had no intention back then of becoming a journalist, but I saw so much of journalism, as I say, during my dad's years in politics, when I was always along, for campaigning, about just sort of the power of the media that could be used for good, that could really do such good things in a community and for people. And I was very sort of entranced by that. And I think, eventually I just realized that that's really what I did want to do, other than mothering.
Yeah, right, which came first.
Yes.
Did you have any, besides, well, you remember your son crawling onto your lap, but any other kind of memorable bloopers or funny moments stand out to you?
I'm sure there were, but that really was the one that I remember the most. I can't right now think of any.
You said some of
can't,
these. Go ahead.
No, what?
Oh, so
What?
you had, I figured you weren't going to think of bloopers, but I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
because I thought maybe you just did think of one.
No.
You talked about some of the people you've interviewed over the years for programs here. So you interviewed the governor at the time. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
John Warner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anybody who came through town, and often did these half-hour programs with them if I could get them booked. And the program with John Warner and Elizabeth Taylor was an interesting experience. She had just had that incident where she choked on a chicken bone or something at a rally, and so we talked about that a little bit, and she was very defensive that anybody can do this. This can happen to anybody, at a rally, which it certainly can. But she was not experienced at the political rally thing at that point. This was brand new for her, so I felt kind of sorry for her. I mean, she was thrown into that, and that was not easy,
Yeah.
But she was lovely.
How about John Warner? What was your impression of him when he left this interview or whatever?
Oh, he Chris was such a gentleman. He was charming, and yes, he was lovely and easy to talk to. Not at all difficult to interview. And Andy Miller and his wife, they were running against each other at the time, and he was the Democrat, and I did a half-hour program with them as well. And no, they were all wonderful to interview. Easy and relaxed, and I never, over the years in doing news stories or my half-hour programs, you realize how many people are very uneasy in front of a camera. I mean, they may know a subject backwards and forwards, but you put the camera on them and they just freeze sometimes. And I was very sympathetic, to that, because I understand how that can be. But because I never had that problem, as I say, having kind of grown up with it, it made it easier for me. But I always felt, tried to put people at ease, because I know that it is an intimidating thing if you're not accustomed to it,
Well, you didn't have the option back in your day of film. But I always say, it's recorded. I'm not going to make you look bad.
Right.
If you want to repeat something or start
Yeah.
over, we've got that option.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
don't worry about
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Were there particular, so you were in the 70s. What news stories were going on? What was the news climate at that time? And
Oh, wow.
specifically here, like, was Jerry Falwell coming into?
Yes, he was certainly a big factor, and I mean, it was really hard for me to remember that far back. I remember that the big flood in '85, of course.
Wait a minute, we're probably going to have to start that over. I think they're walking in for their thing now.
Oh yeah.
We stopped.